A billionaire founder who returns to his own luxury brand as a janitor under a false identity and quietly studies the empire he once built. Chapter 1. The man who built luxury and lost it all. Luxury was never supposed to be loud. That was the belief Alexander Vale built his company on. He didn't start with billboards or celebrities. He started with materials, craft, obsession. While other brands chased attention, Alexander chased precision. He believed real wealth whispered, and for a long time, the world listened. In his early 30s, Alexander founded Vale & Row, a luxury fashion and lifestyle brand rooted in restraint. Tailored suits, leather goods, watches, private collections sold only to those who understood the language of understatement. No logo screaming for validation, no trends, just permanence. The brand grew the way rare things do, slowly, carefully, then all at once. By 40, Alexander was a billionaire, not the flashy kind, the kind that sat in quiet rooms, signing documents that shifted industries. The kind whose name appeared in investor briefings, not gossip columns. He lived in glass and silence, trusted a small circle, and believed loyalty was something money could preserve. That belief would cost him everything. The collapse didn't come from the outside, it came from the inside. Boardroom smiles that stayed too long, contracts that changed hands quietly, decisions made in meetings Alexander wasn't invited to. By the time he realized control had slipped, the narrative had already been written for him. Mismanagement, irresponsibility, a founder who had lost touch. The press was polite, the board was not. Within months, Alexander was pushed out of the company he had named, shaped, and bled for. His shares diluted, his authority erased, his reputation softened into something convenient. A visionary who had peaked too early. When the lawsuits settled and the headlines moved on, Alexander Vale disappeared. No interviews, no statements, no comeback tour. People assumed he had retreated into quiet wealth, licking his wounds somewhere expensive. They were wrong. Alexander changed his name, trimmed his appearance, let the sharpness fade just enough to be forgettable. He sold most of what tied him to the past, not out of desperation, but intention. He wanted distance, clarity, silence. Years passed. Vale & Row thrived without him, or at least that's what it looked like from the outside. New executives, louder campaigns, bigger profits, a different soul. One morning, under a name no one recognized, Alexander walked into the headquarters of the company he had built, not through the front entrance, but through the service doors. He filled out a form, showed ID, answered simple questions, position, janitorial staff, night shift. No one looked twice. As he was handed a uniform and a key card, Alexander felt something settle inside him. Not anger, not revenge, curiosity. If this was no longer his company, he wanted to see what it had become, from the floor up, and this time, he would listen instead of lead. Chapter 2. The Billionaire Who Became Invisible. The uniform fit better than Alexander expected. Gray, plain, disposable. It erased him in ways tailored suits never could. On his first night, no one asked who he used to be. They barely asked his name. To them, he was just Alex, a man who cleaned offices after decisions had already been made and left before the consequences arrived. That invisibility was immediate. Executives passed him without eye contact, voices uninterrupted as if he were part of the furniture. Assistants stepped around him mid-conversation. Security nodded only when protocol demanded it. The building he once knew intimately now moved around him like he didn't exist. And that was the point. From behind a mop and a trash cart, Alexander saw things he had never been allowed to see as a founder. He heard the real conversations, late-night calls made without caution, junior managers mocking customers who would buy anything with the logo on it, designers rushing collections because marketing needed noise, not quality, executives obsessed with quarterly numbers while ignoring the quiet erosion of trust that luxury depended on. Vale & Row still made money, but it was no longer making meaning. Alexander cleaned boardrooms where his portrait had once hung, now replaced with abstract art chosen by consultants who had never touched a sewing needle in their lives. He wiped fingerprints off tables where loyalty was discussed like a strategy instead of a value. Every night he learned something new. The company was cutting corners. Suppliers were being pressured. Craftsmen were being replaced. And worst of all, no one seemed to care. Not because they were evil, because they were comfortable. Alexander kept his head down. He emptied bins, polished glass, listened, observed. He became fluent in the rhythms of decline. How excellence doesn't disappear loudly, but quietly, one compromise at a time. Sometimes he caught his reflection in the polished surfaces of the building. Older now, leaner, eyes sharper from watching instead of being watched. He felt no urge to correct anyone. Power, he had learned, announces itself too early. Instead, he took notes. Mental at first, then written. He mapped decisions to consequences, names to habits, ambition to fear. He saw who protected the brand's soul and who drained it for bonuses. There was a young designer on the 4th floor who stayed late fixing details no one noticed. A logistics manager who argued with procurement over cheaper leather. A customer service lead who fought refunds because she believed trust mattered more than margins. They didn't know it, but they were loyal to a ghost. And then there were others. People who smiled publicly and hollowed the company privately. People who would sell permanence for applause. Alexander realized something unsettling. If he had stayed in power, he might never have seen this. Founders are surrounded by noise. Employees are surrounded by truth. The janitor hears everything because no one fears him. By the 3rd month, Alexander understood the full anatomy of what had been taken from him. Not just the company, but the culture. And he understood exactly how fragile the empire had become. Not because it was failing, but because it believed it was untouchable. As he pushed his cart down the empty hallway one night, Alexander smiled. Not with nostalgia, but resolve. He hadn't come back to reclaim his past. He had come back to decide the future. Chapter 3, Listening from the Shadows. Alexander learned the building's pulse, which elevators executives avoided, which stairwells interns cried in, which conference rooms hosted honest conversations only after midnight, when the power dynamics softened and people forgot to perform. He timed his routes carefully, not to be seen, but to be present. Cleaning at night gave him access no consultant could buy. Doors were left open. Voices dropped. Masks came off. He stood quietly in corners, emptying bins, polishing tables, absorbing the truth executives only spoke when they thought no one important was listening. He heard fear first. Fear of relevance, fear of younger brands, fear of becoming obsolete while pretending to be timeless. Vale and Rowe wasn't competing on craftsmanship anymore. It was competing on attention. And attention, he knew, was a drug. Marketing pushed louder campaigns. Influencers replaced artisans. Collections dropped faster, thinner, cheaper, disguised as agility. Every compromise was justified as temporary. Every temporary decision became permanent. Alexander watched how decay spreads. No single villain, just a chain of small surrenders. One night, while wiping down a boardroom table, he overheard 2 senior executives arguing. "The numbers are fine," one said. "For now," the other replied, "but customers are starting to feel it." Feel it. That word stayed with him. Luxury isn't about price, it's about trust. The belief that what you're buying will outlive trends, status, even you. It just leaks. Alexander noticed patterns no dashboard showed. Customer complaints dismissed as anomalies. Return rates quietly rising. Sales associates no longer proud of the product, just trained to close. He also noticed who still cared. There was Clara, a mid-level merchandiser who refused to approve substandard materials, even when pressured. She stayed late reworking specs that no one else would double-check. There was Jonah, a factory liaison who argued constantly with procurement, insisting suppliers deserved time, not ultimatums. And there was Elena, a retail trainer who spoke to sales staff about heritage, not discounts. They were invisible in meetings, but essential in reality. Alexander began to test something. Small things at first. A forgotten memo placed deliberately on the right desk. A mislabeled sample quietly corrected before review. A spilled coffee timed just right to interrupt a conversation heading toward a bad decision. Nothing dramatic, just friction where complacency had settled. Slowly, outcomes changed. A rushed approval got delayed. A questionable supplier was reevaluated. A campaign lost momentum before it went public. Executives blamed process issues. Alexander called it alignment. The strange part wasn't that he could influence things. It was that no one questioned why the janitor was always nearby when clarity arrived. People talk differently when they think they're alone. Alexander listened to who lied easily and who struggled to justify compromise. He watched who cleaned up messes they didn't create and who took credit for work they never touched. This was due diligence of a different kind, not financial, moral. By month 6, Alexander knew exactly who could rebuild Vale and Row and who would have to go, not because they were incompetent, because they were careless with legacy. One night, as he finished cleaning the executive floor, he paused at the window overlooking the city. The brand's logo glowed faintly on a nearby building, still respected, still profitable, but hollow. He rested his hands on the cart and exhaled slowly. Listening was almost over. Soon it would be time to act. Chapter 4: The Test. No one knew they were failing. Alexander didn't believe in traps. Traps were obvious, emotional, designed to humiliate. What he believed in were choices, the kind people make when they think no one important is watching. The opportunity came disguised as urgency. Vale and Row was preparing to launch a new flagship line. Internally, it was being called Arum, positioned as a return to pure luxury. Externally, it would be marketed as Heritage Reborn, the kind of collection meant to reassure investors and silence critics. The timeline was impossible. Factories were being rushed, materials were substituted quietly, corners were being rounded, then filed off completely. Alexander heard everything. He watched procurement approve a leather supplier with inconsistent grading because they offered speed. He heard marketing plan a narrative they couldn't technically defend. He saw finance sign off on projections built on hope rather than data. So Alexander introduced a variable, nothing dramatic. He simply misplaced a finalized approval folder, carefully, replacing it with an older draft he knew still contained unresolved quality flags. The document would circulate just long enough to force conversation. Then he waited. The first response came from the predictable places. Senior leadership dismissed the flags as outdated. "We've moved past that," they said, without checking whether that was true. Marketing complained the delay would weaken momentum. Finance recalculated, smoothed the numbers, and kept moving. No one asked why the concerns existed in the first place, except 3 people. Clara flagged the leather variants and halted her sign-off, risking her position. Jonah called the factory directly and confirmed the supplier had indeed cut corners. Elena sent a quiet message to retail leadership warning them not to oversell durability. They didn't coordinate. They didn't know each other was acting, but they all made the same decision. Pause. Alexander watched the ripple effect from the shadows. Meetings stretched longer. Tempers rose, deadlines slipped. Executives grew frustrated, blaming inefficiency and middle management paranoia. No one suspected a janitor had anything to do with it. Alexander cleaned the boardroom during one of those tense nights, moving slowly, listening as voices sharpened. "We're overthinking this," one executive said. "We're protecting the brand," Clara replied, her voice steady but tired. "Protecting the brand." That phrase separated everyone in the room. Some heard it as sentimentality, others heard it as responsibility. The delay forced a deeper audit, not because leadership wanted it, but because the system stalled without the usual shortcuts. The audit exposed supplier issues, manufacturing shortcuts, a gap between marketing promises and production reality. Quietly, the Orem launch was pushed back. Publicly, it was framed as strategic refinement. Privately, careers shifted. Procurement lost authority. A senior marketing lead was reassigned. Finance tightened oversight they should have enforced years ago. Alexander didn't smile. This wasn't about punishment. It was about revelation. People hadn't failed the test because of greed or incompetence. They failed because they prioritized speed over substance, optics over truth, and others had passed without knowing a test existed at all. Later that night, Alexander stood alone in the executive washroom, adjusting his gloves as he stared at his reflection in the mirror. The uniform still fit the role. The disguise still held, but the map was complete now. He knew who Vale and Rowe really belonged to, and more importantly, who it didn't. The test was over. The consequences were just beginning. Chapter 5. The ones he chose to keep. Alexander had learned everything he needed to know. Not from reports, not from meetings, but from watching people act when they thought their choices didn't matter. For weeks after the delayed launch, the company returned to its normal rhythm. People talked. Rumors spread. Some blamed leadership. Others blamed bad timing. No one blamed the janitor. Alexander kept cleaning floors, emptying bins, wiping fingerprints off glass walls. But now he was watching with a different purpose. He paid attention to who stayed kind when pressure hit. Some people changed. A few managers became sharp-tongued, snapping at staff, blaming anyone beneath them. Others grew careless, cutting corners even harder, convinced the delay was temporary and consequences were for someone else. But some people stayed the same. Clara still double-checked materials, even when no one asked her to. Jonah stayed late to help junior staff understand their work instead of leaving early like everyone else. Elena took responsibility for mistakes that weren't entirely hers, simply because she believed someone had to. They didn't know they were being noticed. Alexander made sure of that. One evening, as he cleaned near the design floor, he overheard a young employee crying quietly at her desk. She had been blamed for an error she didn't make. Most people walked past her. Clara stopped. She listened, asked questions, then walked straight into a meeting and corrected the record, even though it embarrassed her boss. Alexander stood nearby, mop in hand, unseen. That was when he decided, not who was smart, not who was talented, but who would remain when the disguise came off. Over the next month, small things began to happen. Certain people were transferred to better teams. Others were quietly let go. No announcements, no drama, just changes that felt random to everyone watching. Clara was promoted. Jonah was put in charge of a new unit. Elena was asked to lead a project that actually mattered. They were confused, grateful, and slightly suspicious, but they took the opportunities anyway. Alexander kept cleaning. Then one morning, something different happened. The security guards were suddenly alert. Executives moved quickly through the halls. The air felt tense, like the day before a storm. A company-wide meeting was announced. Mandatory. Employees filled the main hall, whispering, checking their phones, wondering who was in trouble. Alexander stood at the back, still in uniform. When the room finally went quiet, the chairman stepped forward. "There's something we need to address," he said. People leaned in. Alexander took a slow breath. This was the moment where the mask would start to fall, not all at once, but enough to change everything. Chapter 6. The day the janitor didn't show up. The janitor didn't come in that morning. At first, no one noticed. People were busy. Deadlines, meetings, complaints about the delayed launch. The office moved the way it always did, fast and distracted. By mid-morning, someone mentioned it. "Has anyone seen the cleaner today?" Usually, Alexander was already done with half the floor by that time. The trash would be empty, the glass walls spotless, coffee stains wiped away before anyone noticed them. That day, nothing was touched. Bins overflowed, desks stayed messy, fingerprints sat on glass doors like proof that someone was missing. A few employees joked about it. Maybe he finally quit. Can't blame him. This place is stressful. No one worried. Why would they? He was just the janitor. The company-wide meeting from the day before still hung in the air. No one knew what it was about. Just that something big was coming. Around noon, an email went out. All staff, main hall, immediately. Groans echoed through the office. People closed laptops, grabbed notebooks, walked in small groups, guessing what bad news was waiting. Clara sat near the front. Jonah and Elena a few rows behind her. They exchanged nervous looks. The stage lights came on. The chairman walked out first, then a few board members, and then someone else. The room went quiet in a strange way, not sudden, confused, because the man walking onto the stage looked familiar. Same face, same calm eyes, but no mop, no gloves, no worn uniform. Whispers spread. "Wait, isn't that? No way!" That's the janitor. Alexander stepped forward. The chairman cleared his throat. Most of you know this company as a luxury brand, he said. What you don't know is that it has only ever had one owner. The room went completely silent. This, the chairman continued, turning slightly, is Alexander Hale, founder, majority shareholder, and the man who has been working among you for the past 3 years. A wave of shock rolled through the hall. Some people laughed, thinking it was a joke. Others stared, frozen. Clara's mouth fell open. Jonah felt his stomach drop. Elena couldn't breathe. Alexander looked out at them, not smiling, not angry, just calm. I didn't come here to test you, he said. His voice was steady, clear. I came here to understand you. No one spoke. I wanted to see who you were when you thought no one important was watching. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I saw kindness. He nodded slightly toward Clara. I saw integrity. A glance toward Jonah. I saw accountability. His eyes found Elena. Then his tone changed. And I saw cruelty, laziness, and people who believed status gave them permission to forget decency. No names were mentioned. They didn't need to be. Alexander took a breath. Some of you were promoted recently. That wasn't luck. More murmurs. Some of you won't be here much longer. That isn't revenge. The silence was heavy now. This company will move forward with people who respect work, not titles. He paused. And the janitor you ignored? He was listening. Chapter 7. When respect suddenly changed direction. Alexander had always stood out, even when no one noticed him. As a janitor, he was in his early 40s, tall, lean, with calm eyes that never rushed. His hair was always neatly cut, his posture straight, his movements careful and unhurried. There was nothing sloppy about him, nothing careless. Even in a worn uniform, he carried himself like someone who owned his time. That morning after the revelation, he returned to the office. Not in a suit, not with an entourage, but dressed simply, clean shirt, dark trousers, polished shoes, still understated, still controlled. But everything felt different. People stood when he entered rooms. Conversations stopped when he passed. Eyes followed him. The same hallways he once cleaned quietly now felt tight with attention. Some employees avoided him completely. Others smiled too much, laughed too quickly, tried to explain themselves without being asked. Good morning, sir. Mr. Hale. Such an honor. Alexander acknowledged them with a nod. Nothing more. Respect given out of fear had never impressed him. He spent the day walking through departments, sitting in on meetings, listening more than speaking. When he did talk, his words were simple, direct, easy to understand. What problem are we solving? Why does this take so long? Who does this help? People stumbled over answers they once delivered confidently. In one meeting, a senior manager presented an idea that sounded impressive, but meant nothing. Big words, fancy slides. Alexander waited. Xander. Then asked quietly, "Can you explain it like I'm new here?" The room went still. The man tried again. Failed. Alexander nodded. Then you don't understand it yet. No anger. No insults. Just truth. Later, he walked past the cleaning supply room. The door was open. The cart still sat there. Mop, bucket, gloves, untouched since yesterday. He stopped. For a moment, he remembered the weight of the mop in his hands, the way people talked over him, the way some didn't even look at his face. He didn't feel bitterness. He felt clarity. Alexander had never been pretending to be small. He had been observing. By evening, the company felt shaken, not by his power, but by what he had seen. Promotions were reviewed, roles were questioned, quiet workers were suddenly noticed. The office learned a hard lesson that day. Titles don't create character. Visibility doesn't equal value. And respect, once lost, is difficult to earn back. As Alexander left the building that night, the security guard stood straighter than usual. "Good night, sir," he said. Alexander smiled, not because of the title, but because the man had always greeted him that way. Some people, he realized, didn't need a revelation to show who they were. Chapter 8. The night he decided no more. That night, Alexander didn't go anywhere expensive. No rooftop bar, no private club, no victory dinner. He went home, a quiet apartment, clean, minimal, almost empty. The kind of place built for thinking, not living. He sat alone for a long time. He replayed the faces he had seen that day, the fear dressed up as respect, the smiles that arrived too late, the confidence that vanished the moment truth entered the room. He thought of the years he had spent invisible, the meetings he had cleaned after, the lies he had overheard, the shortcuts taken when people thought no one important was listening. He remembered the man who had spoken to him like he was nothing, not with anger, with certainty. Alexander stood up and walked to the window. The city glowed beneath him, towers of glass and light, many of them wearing his brand. Vale and Row, his name, his work, his mistake, for leaving it in the wrong hands for too long. No more, he said quietly, not as a threat, as a decision. By morning, Alexander knew exactly what to do. He didn't need investigations. He didn't need consultants. He didn't need time. He had already spent years on the ground, watching everything. He knew who cut corners, who abused authority, who spoke about the brand but treated people like tools. And he knew who hadn't. Clara, who protected people even when it cost her comfort. Elena, who double-checked everything, not for praise but because truth mattered. Jonah, who stayed late, fixing what others ignored, even when no one was watching. They had passed a test they never knew existed, and now they were about to matter. The next day, Alexander acted, quietly, precisely. Phone calls were made, meetings were scheduled, contracts were reviewed, and ended. Bad eggs didn't leave with drama. They simply disappeared, and something in the company began to shift. Chapter 9. The company and the man healed together. Alexander rebuilt Vale and Row the same way he had built it the first time, from the inside. Clara was promoted, not as a symbol, but as authority. She worked beside him, not beneath him. Elena was placed in charge of oversight and accountability. For the first time, quality had teeth. Jonah led operations, quietly enforcing standards others only talked about. There were no speeches, no press tours, no ego, just work. Bad leadership was removed. Shortcuts were eliminated. Suppliers were replaced. Craft returned, slowly at first, then unmistakably. Within months, customers noticed. Complaints dropped. Trust returned. Within a year, Vale and Row expanded into markets it had failed to penetrate for 3 years straight. Not louder, better. More countries, stronger partnerships, higher standards. The company healed because the right man was finally in power. But success has a way of revealing another truth. Alexander, now in his late 40s, would return home to silence. No family, no children, no one waiting. The company was whole again. He wasn't. One evening after a long strategy meeting, Alexander watched Clara gather her things. Calm, kind, unchanged by her rise. She still spoke to everyone the same way, still listened, still noticed people. The same woman he had watched, unnoticed, years ago. He realized something then. He didn't need another disguise to find love. He had already seen it, clearly. Alexander invited her to a business dinner, then another. Work slowly became conversation. Conversation became laughter. Laughter became honesty. When he finally told her how long he had been watching, not as a janitor, but as a man learning who she truly was, she didn't recoil. She smiled. They married quietly, they built a family, they built a life, and Vale and Row continued to grow, not just in size, but in soul. Alexander had rebuilt his company, and at last, he rebuilt himself. The end. You've just witnessed another tale of struggle, power, and silent revenge. This is the Billionaire Underdog Stories, where shadows become kings. If you want to become the next billionaire, like and subscribe for more stories like this. See you on the next one.